Hey, everybody, welcome back to Lettermen Row yet again. We've got some breaking news, a bit of a rapid reaction that Ohio State will not travel on Saturday to play Maryland. That's Spencer Holbrook over there. He was actually going to be on the road with me this week, so he's trying to get a little bit of that Maryland flavor behind him, obviously. COVID-related issues, obviously, for the Terrapins. They've paused all team activities there in College Park. Ohio State had continued to do its part. It was anticipating playing. We had just wrapped up a practice report, Spencer, and we had talked to 4 or 5 Buckeyes today before their practice, and then the plug was pulled. This is the first time that Ohio State has had to deal with this, really outside of a false positive for Justin Hilliard, that we're aware of at this point. They've been nowhere near having to have a cancellation on its own. Ryan Day's talked about the importance of staying vigilant and acting as if everybody has it. No telling how this happened to Maryland. It's not to point fingers at them, but this is the first time now that this has really touched Ohio State.
Yeah, and if you look at Maryland, you really don't want to speculate on how it happened, but you look at the timing just around the country with all these college football games being canceled. You went to a school that I'm assuming like to celebrate at the end of October. I went to a school that is notorious for celebrating at the end of October. We know how these college kids operate when it comes to Halloween. I don't want to speculate that all of this has to do with Halloween, but it seems like when you have all these restrictions for multiple months and then there's a certain weekend that comes up, it just happens. And like I said, I don't want to speculate with Maryland, but it just seems like that's kind of where everything's trending, because I think this is the 8th game that's canceled this year, and it's unfortunate that it touches one of the top teams in the country.
Yeah, you sound like what I did earlier with the practice report with putting on the conspiracy theorist hat. Maybe it's not even that much of a conspiracy. I mean, Maryland didn't even play on Halloween night. They had a Friday game, pulled off the upset against Minnesota, so they would have been free all Saturday to do whatever. We don't know.
No,
that's not, and it doesn't matter, because even teams that have been extremely vigilant have seen this happen. It's the way it's spreading, and you look at the case numbers across the country. This was inevitable, and I think that is why we've talked about this a number of times. It's just crazy to look at how the Big Ten has handled this, because there is nowhere for this game to be rescheduled. It's an East Division game. Maryland has already won 2 Big Ten games. This is the division race is now unbalanced at this point. Indiana, if they win on Saturday, they come to Columbus next week in sole possession of first place, be a half game up on the Buckeyes. Even though there's nothing the Buckeyes could have done about it. The way that they handled all of this has been a disaster. And we all knew when they pushed it back to the 24th that this was going to be a problem. And it didn't even take 1 week till Wisconsin had to pull the plug. I don't understand how they thought they could manage this without any opportunity to reschedule games.
Yeah, it's really hard to isolate yourself on a college campus. That's just the way it is. And for them to not give any wiggle room whatsoever. Well, actually, let me backtrack. For them to give wiggle room, cancel, then give no wiggle room a month later is absurd. It's the worst form of leadership you could have. It's the opposite of leadership. I don't even know what that is. It's the opposite of that. It's like I said, it's absurd. I don't understand how they thought they could get through this. And they should have, the alarm should have started going off when Wisconsin had to cancel, and it didn't. And now you're kind of up a creek without a paddle, because there's nothing you can do about it. And if we know one thing about the colorful Blazers in Pasadena, they're not moving the playoff. So these games are not going to be rescheduled. And I don't really know where the Big Ten goes from here.
That's really the only possible solution at this point is for the College Football Playoff Organizing Committee to step in. And I'm not optimistic. I'm with you. It's probably not going to happen. And I don't even know that the Rose Bowl has obviously been entrenched in that day. The Sugar Bowl doesn't want to move either. Those are 2 problems. It's an antiquated notion. It needs to be changed for the good of college football, that you have to tell the Rose Bowl that the Rose Parade does not matter. College football playoffs need to be in prime locations, and this year in particular, they need to be 1 or 2 weeks later to get some flexibility to other leagues. The problem or the issue that I was holding out for now wasn't even related to the Rose Bowl. I felt like the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 were unwilling to move it because they didn't ever cancel their entire season in the first place. Well, now guess what? Is it 4 SEC games that are canceled now this weekend? They're running out of opportunities to reschedule every game. Alabama LSU is one of their most valuable television properties. There's nowhere to put it. Maybe now there's an opportunity where these leagues all get together and say, if we're going to have a legitimate season, a legitimate championship, a legitimate playoff, we need more time. And I would put the odds of that still very low, but maybe this is a tipping point where Ohio State is missing a game. Trevor Lawrence has been out. Alabama can't play. You've had Florida miss games. Like the top of the race, those are the teams that need to play, and they're not going to be able to play a full schedule.
Yeah, they need to come together and put differences aside, put monetary interests aside, and put all interests aside, and look at what's best for the sport and what's best for the college football playoff, what's best for the New Year's Six bowls, and really all the bowls in general. It needs to be done. It needs to be bubbled. I do not have any confidence that that's going to happen, but that's what needs to be done. And like I said, they've got to come together and come to something, because all these cancellations, and even, you didn't even mention Notre Dame had to shut down for a little bit. Like every team at the top has been affected by it, and it's being affected in a lot of cases because teams at the bottom are having games canceled. And you don't mean to disparage Maryland or disparage really LSU right now, because they're kind of at the bottom, but like these teams are having issues that are at the bottom, and it's affecting the top.
Yeah. So for Ohio State now, not the bye week that they wanted, but maybe it's a silver lining for them getting ready for this suddenly huge matchup with Indiana, a week and a half from now in the Horseshoe, big noon kickoff. The downside for the players and the coaching staff is that they will still be watching that film of the second half from Rutgers and stewing. Maybe that is, again, another part where they will come out absolutely guns a-blazing. They were going to do that, I think, to Maryland on Saturday, upset that they were being judged harshly, or that they didn't play hard enough in the second half. Again, that's a matter of anybody's perspective. But now that's all channeled at Indiana. They know what's going to be on the line. It was no matter what, it was looking like the Big Ten East Division title game. And now they're going to have had that extra week of practice to sort of, channel that frustration, unleash that frustration on an opponent next week.
Well, and it's also this bye week is crucial for Ohio State. You can get a little healthier. You can get all the dings out of you. You can get a little bit extra time in the training room. You've got to be vigilant with COVID. Like this thing, it's spreading. I know Franklin County here in Ohio is not in the greatest shape when it comes to COVID right now, as is most of the country. Like you finally get a Saturday off. You got to take advantage of it and get healthy and stay healthy. I think that's the biggest thing, because the biggest obstacle for Ohio State on its way to Indiana now is not Maryland. It's COVID. Like you just have to stay as alert as you can, keep watching film, do what Justin Fields does. If you go to the grocery store maybe once, but other than that, stay home with your dog and watch your film, because we talked to him about that today. Just be as bubbled as you can personally, and make sure you're on your P's and Q's when it comes to football, but also on the health side, because if there's one thing that Ryan Day probably didn't want through this was a bye week, because you got a Saturday off now. And I think that's something that they need to be careful of.
Yeah, he just talked about that with the Rutgers game. They missed one day of practice out of their normal routine before Rutgers because of Election Day, and they felt all out of whack. And now nobody's ever had to deal with this. You don't suddenly get bye weeks after you've been prepping for an opponent for 3 days. And that's situation. Ohio State will not be at Maryland on Saturday. Spencer will not be on the road for the first time this year, unfortunately. Doesn't get to drive over to College Park with me. Maybe that's for the best as well. We're still going to have a lot more coverage of Ohio State no matter what. But that game on Saturday is off. The Terrapins have COVID. They won't be able to play. We're going to have to come up with some other things to cover for Ohio State this weekend. For Spencer, I'm Austin Ward. We will see you next time at Lettermen Row.